Hey guys, good morning one and all, and welcome to the video. My name is Samal Shah, and in this video I would be teaching you guys about GraphQL using Python. So you'll be using a library called Graphene. I'm gonna basically walk you through all the steps right from scratch. We'll be making simple GraphQL queries. I'll teach you about everything like what a mutation is, how you can create a mutation, and stuff like that. I hope you are excited to learn about GraphQL and Graphene with Python. So a little bit information about myself for people who are watching me for the first time. So my name is Saumil. I'm originally from Mumbai. I did my bachelor's in electronic and recently completed my double master's. I love to teach people on YouTube about software engineering, programming, about database, ETL jobs, and new upcoming trending technologies. So yeah, so let me just show you what we are about to learn in this tutorial series is as follow. I have a very nice slides made for you where I'll be covering about a lot of things like scalars, how to make a schema. I'll be teaching you the installation of GraphQL. We'll be learning about code, queries, various data types that Graphene offers, such as int, float. So you can see some of the data types Graphene offers. We'll learn about mutation. We'll try to create our own mutation, input field variables, and stuff like that. I'll try my best to cover all the parts of GraphQL in this video. As I said, I'm not an expert in GraphQL. I learned by myself by watching documentation, and I want to teach you guys. So let's get started with the first session. So let's get started. So before even starting programming, let's understand what is GraphQL and why we should consider learning that. So let me show you the table of contents. So I would try my best, as I said, to teach you everything. We'll learn about scalars, then we'll learn about list, objectives, enum, interface, unions, mutation. We'll see what is GraphQL, why we need to learn GraphQL. So let's get started. GraphQL. Graphene is a Python library for building GraphQL APIs in Python easily. Its main goal is to provide a simple but extendable API for making developers' life easy. But what is GraphQL? GraphQL is a data query language developed internally by Facebook in 2012 before being publicly released in 2015. It provides an alternative to REST and ad hoc web services architecture. We believe that GraphQL is the next big thing after peanut butter and REST. Well, some definitions, some big terms, right? What does that mean? So it's basically kind of a query language used for data. When you return JSON, right? You can query that JSON data, whatever fields you want. I'll show you a visually also. Hold on, a little bit. Let's just read a little bit about this. Basically, as you can see, who is using GraphQL? Facebook is a mobile app, have been powered with GraphQL since 2012. A GraphQL spec was open source in 2015 and now available for many environments and is used by the teams of all sizes. So ask what you need and get exactly that. I'm going to show you by going to the link. Let me just read the definition first. Send GraphQL queries to your API and get exactly what you need. Nothing more, nothing less. GraphQL queries also returns predictable result. Apps using GraphQL are fast, stable, because they can control the data they get, not the server. All right, that makes sense. Now I want to show you a small example. Actually, I want to go to the link and show you a small what exactly GraphQL is. You might be curious to know. So this is GraphQL, their official website. As you can see, we have some schemas and all. We'll learn about that. Don't worry about that. So as you can see, as this guy here is typing the fields, you would in the response, in your JSON response, you would get only those fields. So if I specify height, okay, it would only give me height. If I say mass, it would give me mass. It won't return me all of that, because in JSON, think about it, you are returning every single thing. You're saying, okay, we want this, okay, take this. But in GraphQL allows you to query the data and only get fields that you want. That's the power of GraphQL. So as I said, get many resources in single request. You can do that. As you can see, you can write complicated queries here. So you can, so that's that. So this is the GraphQL. You can see all films. And then he's basically providing a films object. And then in that, you want to say, hey, just give me title. So that's what he's saying. And give me opening crawl. So this is just showing you how you can use GraphQL. As you can see, it provides, it's pretty easy and fast. A lot of companies are using it. So yeah, let's consider learning about GraphQL. I have told you why you should learn GraphQL, because it allows you to query the, isn't this amazing? Like, think about it, whatever fields you want, it would give you only those fields. And you can also rename and do all sort of stuff. I'll teach you about all the fancy things like mutation and all, but yeah, that's exactly what GraphQL is. So how do we install GraphQL? Very easy. All you have to do is say pip install graphene greater than or equal to 2.0. That's a library in Python which would allow you to do things with GraphQL. Now in the next part, let's jump into coding simple GraphQL. Okay. All right, so let's start programming GraphQL queries first of all. So let's understand the hello world example first. So let's import the library. I usually have an habit of doing imports in a try catch block. So let's do import. Let's do import JSON there. Computer is a little lagging, maybe. Yeah, a little bit. So import. We'll say graphene, and we also want to import an operating system, OS. Sorry. You want to say this, and if there was any error, you would print that this module was not found. Okay, and if everything went okay, you want to print a message saying that okay, perfect. So the first GraphQL query, right? We'll understand all of that. Let me also open my snippets so I don't forget anything. So let's write a simple GraphQL query. So let's write class query, okay, and this has to inherit from the class graphene dot object type. Okay, now let's say we have two attributes or two fields in our JSON. Let me actually show you what I'm trying to say, because it's a new thing. You know, we have to understand what I'm saying. Let's say this is your JSON record. Okay, initially you were just basically, as I said, you're returning both of these, right? So now let's write the schema, or whatever you want to call this, name is equal to, I want to say graphene, it's a string, so I'm specifying that. Similarly, age, I'm gonna say graphene dot string. I specifying that it's a string. Now whenever you write fields, you have to always resolve these fields. Means whenever a person asks for this field, what do you want to return? So let's write the resolve method. So let's say def, you have to use the keyword resolve, and then followed by the name of the argument that you are using. Okay, now instead of self, you want to pass in root. That's what the definition says on the documentation. And now what do you want to return? So let's return the name Sawmill, and I'll show you the power of GraphQL now. Similarly, let's write a resolve for age. Remember, it takes a root and info and not self. Well, I am 25 years or 26, I'm not sure. It's fine, we'll just say 25 for now. Okay, so we have a simple query. Now we even want to write a schema. Oops, what did I do? Sorry. So with that being said, now schema is equal to graphene dot schema takes a graphene dot schema takes a query. Okay, now let's see what happens when you print the schema. It will tell you the schema of that. So let's run that, or you know what? Yeah, let's just run that. So it printed a schema. So it said that you have a schema called query, which has two attributes, name and age. You can query name and age. If you just want name, you can say, hey, just give me name, don't give me age. If you just want age, you can say that. Now let's write a query, a simple GraphQL query. So, so now let's write our first. Remember the name Sawmill that I wrote, that's coming from the database. Assume it's coming from the database for now. Usually triple quotes works the best. Okay, so now the query, right? So you can say query, give it a name, my query. Okay, make sure we give it a space. Now what you want to do is you want to query for the field. So I want to say that, hey, please give me a field excuse me, called name. You don't have to specify commas and age. So that's my query. Once you have your query, you have to execute your query, right? So we say schema.execute, because otherwise how would GraphQL know that where to execute? So you have to specify a schema. So you say query, that's the query that I want to, actually let's give it a better name here. Okay, so now I can actually print the result. So if I try to print the result, I'll show you what it does now. Look at the magic of GraphQL. Oops, and we have an error. It's okay. Let's fix the error. Says execute result is not JSON serializable, which is fine. So seems like, wait, did I do something crazy? No. So it's just not JSON serializable. Let's just print result. Okay, so now it works, and the reason I got that error is because you have to say dot data on that. So let's do it again. JSON.dump data, and now I'm gonna indent 3. So let's run that. So now you can see the result is name and age. That's crazy. You'll say, okay, so what's the difference? Look at this one. You will be amazed. So say you just want the name and you don't want the age. So only name, only get the data what you need. Okay, say you want to rename the this field to, let's say, my name. So in front end you had to rename this for some reason. You don't have to change your backend. Just by saying colon, you provide an alias. Oops, I guess it was the other way around. Aliases is in the next part, I guess. I had it here. Oh yeah. So you can see, you can just provide the colon a little before. I actually did a mistake there, but so if I say y name or whatever, if for reason you have to rename the field, look at the magic, guys. No need to change your backend for all these things. GraphQL does automatically for you. I mean, you see why you should now learn GraphQL. So that's the power of GraphQL. So let's go to the slides again and understand what we have just what we just did. Let me collapse this. Let me make sure. Yeah, I gotta swap the display again. So we saw the basics now. So you should be able to relate this. Graphene, we made a simple query. Always whenever we provide the fields, you have to resolve those fields. Resolve is basically what happens when you ask only for that field. You have to return some data, right? So that's that, my friends. Printing schema shows that what field you can query. In this case, you can query name and age. It shows that, right? Below shows the output for the query we wrote. I just showed you that. This is how you would write a query, and this is also how you write aliases. So if you want to rename the field, you would say the name that you want to rename, colon, and then the actual field name. Does that make sense so far? So the next part would be basically how we can pass arguments in the GraphQL queries. Like say this name has to take a name like Sawmill or blah, blah, blah. How do I do that? So let's learn. Let's learn about how to pass arguments in GraphQL. So let me go to the next slide. So passing arguments, it's very easy. All you have to say is you have to provide a name of what name you want to give. And then let me actually show you an example, and then let's come back to the slide. So we had this, right? So now I want to pass a value here. And this value has to be, you have to specify a type, what type it is. So I'm going to say, hey, it's going to take graphene.string, okay? And this is also going to take a default value. That would be, let's say Sam, okay? So that's the default value. So now this one, when you resolve the name, you have to provide the value because it takes that, right? Instead of that, I'm gonna return the value. So now when you do that, so right now, if you see in the query, I am not supplying the argument's name. So I should be receiving the default value that is Sam. And sure enough, it works. Now, if I want to pass an argument in the query, it's as easy as this. You say braces, you provide the variable name that you want to give, colon, and in the double quotes, you would provide that. So hopefully that should work without any errors. And it works. So that is how you pass arguments in GraphQL. Of course, sure enough, you can rename the column by using the colon syntax. That works as well. You can see that's now been. Hope you enjoyed so far, right? So let's move on with the session. Now this might get a little tricky, but don't worry, I'm there for you. I'll try to make it easy. Different types of scalars available in Graphene. So these are the different types of scalar, that is list and non-null, object type, enums, interface, unions, and mutation. You'll say, what the hell is this? Okay, it's okay. List is basically an array. Non-null means it should not be null. Object type means if you have any object or JSON, that's an object. Enum is basically, you know what enum is. Interface, unions, and mutations, we'll see about that. Mutation is basically about CRUD operation, like delete, add, whatever that. So it's basically CRUD operation. Schema. So remember, we in the session we always used to make the schema. This one right here. If I can take a pen right here, not sure, but pen. So right here, right, we made the schema, right? So what the hell is the schema? So the schema always takes a query. So whatever query the user supplies, that's my root query. Let me just read the definition. A GraphQL schema defines a type and relationship between the fields in your API. Okay, that makes sense. A schema is created by supplying the root objectives of each operation: query, mandatory, mutation, and subscription. So apart from the query, it takes mutation and subscription. What is mutation? Basically, CRUD operation. Will look into that in a bit. So don't worry about that. Let me actually see if I can. Okay, so that's that. Schema will also collect all type of definition related to the root operation. So basically, the root operation basically is gonna collect all the information about the root operation, like name, age, what fields are there, what you can do on those fields. So the job of schema is to collect all those information from the root operation and then supply them to the validator and the executor. So yep. Now AutoCamel case. What the hell is this? So what I mean by that is, guys, let's read first the definition. By default, all the fields and arguments names that are not explicitly set with the name args will be converted into a snake case. In a camel case, the API is usually being consumed by a JS mobile client. Okay, what the hell? I'll explain it. Don't worry. Easy. So remember, if you give this as a name, last name, right? So when you want to query this data, you have to say a camel case. See this. So you cannot say last underscore name. It's not going to work. It has to use a camel case. It automatically converts that. You know, if you don't want that behavior, you can set the flag to false. There is an auto camel case is equal to false in the schema. By default, it's set to true. So hopefully that should make sense. Okay, so that's that. Let's look a little forward. Now we are just gonna jump into scalars. Scalars, yep, let's do it. So what are scalars, right? So again, let's read the definition first, and then we'll try to understand in an easy way. Okay, scalar types represent concrete values at the leaves of the query. There are several built-in types that Graphene provides out of the box, which represents common values in Python. You can also create your own scalar types for better express the values that you might have in your data model. All scalar types except the following arguments are optional. Okay, I'll make it easy for you, don't worry. So first of all, takes a name. Okay, takes a name, override the name to the field. Then we have a description if you want to provide a description to that. Required, if that is a required parameter. Default value, we already saw that. So these are the things that we can provide in this right here. So you can provide name, you can provide all of that. So description, required, deprecated reason. So these are all the things you can provide. Okay, that's the scalar. Now these are the list of the scalars Graphene provides out of the box. Let me read one by one. Non-null, that means of course it should not be null. Integer, float, boolean, id, date, JSON string, date time, time, base 64, decimal, list, non-null list, object type, enum, interface, union, mutation, which is nothing but CRUD operation, input and output field types, and custom scalars. Whew, that's a lot. So hopefully this should make sense. Now, what I want to show you is in the next example is, what if you have a data structure like this? It's pretty common, right? You would have objects like this, right? How would you write the schema? Let me show you that in the video. So as I said, it should be easy. I have an example, I guess, in the example 2. Let me make sure I had an example I wrote for you. Yeah, that's the one. So I want to refer this code right here for my snippets example. So this is the schema that you want to create. So let's what we want to do first is, first of all, I'm thinking, hold on, should I do it in this one, or I'm again thinking, give me one sec. I'm thinking that should I make a separate class and then call inside that class, or what's the best way? So let's do this, okay? I'm gonna use this way. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna define the schema inside. So I'm gonna call a class. So let's say class, let's say person, right? This is a person, right? So remember, has to inherit from a graphene.object type. No constructor here, remember that also. Name. So you want to say, hey, this takes a name, okay? I'm gonna say, hey, the name is basically very easy. It's basically graphene.string. It's on string. Then also takes an age. The age has to be also a string, like you'll serialize it as a string. So I'm saying that, hey, please, if you could do this for me, string. Now, if you see, that's an array, right? So I want to say here, so instead here, I want to remove all of these. See how am I doing it, okay? So now what I want to do is I want to call an array, and I want to say array of what? So I'm going to say, hey, it's a graphene.list, okay? And in that, I want to say that you have a person class. That should make sense, okay? Now, this data, right? You have to define this data somewhere. It's coming from the database, or, okay, so that's the data, right? I want to remove that one. No need of that. Python, not JavaScript. Yeah, I code so many languages, sometimes I forget the syntax here and there, but it's fine. So let's make that into string. Okay, so we have that. So what we want to do is, when you call the resolve method on this, and remember, what does resolve takes? Root and node. Remember, very important. Oops. RESOLVE, resolve. Takes a root and info by default. And all I'm gonna do here is basically say import data. That's pretty much it that I'm gonna do here. So I'm not gonna execute the query now. I wanna show you the schema, how it looks like. So we'll run this again, example 1. Okay, so now look at the schema. It says that, hey, the schema has a query. It has a type called as person, which takes 2 arguments, name and age. It has a type called query, again, which is an array, and this array is of person. So that makes sense. Now, if you want to query this data, what you would do, let's write the query. So you have array, right? Excuse me, sorry for that. So you want to say array, and in this, what do you want, right? So in this, I'm saying that, hey, can you please give me a name and also an age? Let's try that one. Hopefully it should not break, and it should give the output to us. So it did return null, and let's figure out why that happened. So give me one sec. I guess I'd just say this one, maybe. Oops, give me. Yeah, I guess I found out the mistake. It's because I have named this incorrectly. That's the reason it was not resolving it. I was getting null. So let's try that one, maybe. Oops. So yeah, the spelling is now correct. Resolve array. Okay, it takes a person, and now let's try to query that again. So I'm saying that, hey, in the query, I want to query the my array object, and could you please give me name and age? So I'm gonna try that one now, and sure enough, it works like a charm. So let me show you. So that's the response, my array, name and age. Okay, so that works amazing, right? So that's that. If you just wanted name, you could also query just the name argument, right? So it would only give you name. So that's the power of GraphQL. Let me not print the schema for now for a second. So perfect, that's amazing. So what if I just wanted the age? You could do that. What if you wanted to rename the age as capital H? Well, you could do that. Perfect. So works fine, right? So that's the power of GraphQL. Now let's learn a simple thing. Might be very simple for you, but yeah, let's try out. Is there a way I can pass a size? If I say size to 1, it would only return the first like one argument. So let's see if we can provide that. So now what I want to do is so this Graphene would also take a size attribute, I guess. So I'm gonna say Graphene dot integer. So that's a Graphene dot integer. I wanna say default underscore value is equal to 1. So I'm saying that, hey, the default value has to be 1, has to be an integer. And now what I would do is I'm just gonna say with the size here, it should be okay. So let's try out the query. I'm not passing the size right now. So let me query for all the fields right now, name and age. So again, I'm gonna run my GraphQL query. Okay, so it brings me one element instead of 2. That is because the default is set to 1. So now you could override that and say, okay, please size colon and what was that, 2. So if I do that, it should return me 2 documents, hopefully. Yeah. So as you can see, you can limit the size of the documents that you want by using this syntax. It's pretty cool, right? See how GraphQL is so powerful, and if you just want name, give me name. If you want to rename this, you can do aliases and stuff like that. That's that. Let's go to the slides and explore more in detail. So we explored all of these right now. Let me just make sure. Yeah, we explored all of this. Now time is basically we explore a mutation. So in the next session, we are going to explore. All right, guys, it's time to learn about mutation. So let's back over to the slides again and get started. So we learned about the scalars. Now, what the hell is mutation? A mutation is a special objective that also defines an input. Okay, so in layman language, I would say mutation is nothing but a CRUD operation. Remember how if you want to add to the database, you want to delete, it's just a CRUD, just a fancy name they give, like mutation, whatever. So yeah, that's the mutation. Like let's see how we can make a simple mutation. It's very easy. So say you wanna, we made this a GraphQL query. We query the data like array, age, and name. Let's say you also wanna add people now on the database, right? So you have to create a mutation. Now, how do I do that? Is easy, not difficult. So let me show you how you can actually create a mutation. It's easy. So yeah, so let me actually format this a little bit. Okay, so that's the person. We basically said that how the data has to be defined. I said, okay, that's the way I'm going to define my data. Now you want to have a mutation. So what you want to do is basically you're going to create a class called as create person. As the name suggests, it's going to create a person. Okay. Remember, as usual, you have to inherit this from not from object type, but you have to inherit from mutation because it's a mutation class. So it takes an argument. Now it has to define a class argument. I know it might be a little dirty, but the syntax. But trust me, once you get the once you get the idea, you'll love it. So class arguments. No, so you want to add a person, right? So you want to add a name to that person. Okay, makes sense, right? You want to add a name. Graphene.string. So I'm just saying that, hey, that name is a string. Okay, and I'm telling that whenever the user supplies, it has to be a string. Now in return, what I want to return to the user is I'm going to return an OK flag saying that okay, everything went okay. So graphene.boolean, and I'm also going to return the person object that the person you created. So person is equal to, I'm going to say graphene. I'm going to define a field. Now this is where the concept of field would come into. I'm saying that, hey, I'm going to return a field called as person to the user. And when you define a mutation, you always have to mutate. I know it's a little fancy stuff, but you'll be like, trust me, it's easy. So info, and you will say a name, because it takes a name argument. Remember, you defined it here. Now you gotta mutate that. So what you want to do is you want to call the person, and you want to call the constructor. Remember, the constructor takes name and age, but we'll just supply name for now. Similarly, you can do it that for the age. So I'm giving, hey, give it a name called, give it a name, name, and I want to say that, hey, okay is equal to true. So this variable that I define, I'm setting it to true. And what I want to return to the user is basically, I want to return an object of create user person is equal to person. And I'm going to say, okay. Okay. So that's my mutate class. Now, the way you would, as I said, with the way you would, give me 1 sec. Am I missing anything? Create field person, my mutation. Okay, I was just checking my documentation because it's a little, for the first time, it's a little tricky. So you defined your mutation. That's the mutation name, create user. If you want to create a new user, you would basically use the word create user. Now, what you want to do is you want to define a class called my. We'll go over this once again. Don't worry. We'll say my mutation, and what you want to say is basically you want to again inherit this from graphene.object type. Now, what you want to do here is basically, since this was create underscore person, remember the underscore syntax automatically gets converted into a camel case. We saw the documentation. Remember, don't forget all of these. So let's say define a field, and we define that. Now it's very easy. So in the query, all you have to do is basically you have to say graphene dot get rid of that one. I'm gonna use this one. Hopefully that makes sense. So now I just want to print the schema for now. I don't want to run anything. I just want to show you what the schema is doing. Remember, we are missing one small thing here. That is, we gotta provide a mutation. Remember in the documentation, I told you that the schema also takes mutation and subscription. So that's that guy right here. So my mutation, I would actually give the name here. For some reason, is it giving me red? No, it's good. We good. So now let's run this and see what we get. Not that one actually, but this one. That's because I'm not printing the schema. Okay, so let's understand this. Okay, it's a little tricky. So first of all, it says that we have a type called as person, which has two arguments, name and age. Then it says you also have a mutation in case you want to create a person. So it's the mutation name is create person. What it returns is it takes an OK, that's a boolean, and it takes a person. This is this argument right here. So now it's telling type mutation. That means, hey, you have a mutation in this which you can use, which is called create person, which takes a name, which should be a string, and it would create a person for you. In return, what it would return you is create person. This is this guy. It will return this to you. So it's pretty easy. Okay, let's go once again. Okay, so we have a mutation here. It says type my mutation. It says create person. It takes a name, and it basically gonna create a person for you. In return, what it's gonna return to you is gonna be returning this two things for you. Person is this. You can query these two attributes from the person, and the query at the query level you can use person. Okay, I know it's a little tedious, but let's bear with me, please. So if you want to use the mutation now, you have to provide the word mutation instead of query, and then you would say whatever name you want to give. I'm gonna say my mutation here. Now you have to use the word create mutation. So I'm gonna remove all of that. Create mutation. Remember that was the word. So if you come to the schema, where was that? Create mutation. Yeah, create mutation. Oops, let me pull this up a little bit. So if you see, we have a create person, sorry, not create mutation, create person. So we have a create person, if you can see right here, and this is a mutation. This takes two things, name, name basically. So that's what you do. So now I'm gonna provide them with a name, just how we define. And if you want to query the parameters in return, so you can say, hey, okay, create a person, and when the person is created, I want to query the name attribute of that person and indent that a little bit here, and then I'm saying that return me, okay, that's a boolean, whether it is true or false. So if I run this, so you know what happens? So you should expect Peter in the result, right? Sure enough, Peter. So okay, once again I'm gonna go over it. I know it's a little bit tedious, I mean a lot of classes and all. Okay, one sec. Okay, first of all, what we did is basically we defined a class called person. We said name and age, there will be two things that I want the person class to do. If you want to add a person to the database, I said I'm creating a mutation called create person. Then I defined a graphene.mutation. Basically, I said it's a mutation, and then I said name graphene.string. I want to only set the name attribute here. And then we use the word mutate to resolve that. Now, you have to provide the constructor name. I could have provided the age, but that's a default, so I'm not providing that. So it's going to set the name, and in return, it's going to return you the create object, which is basically these two arguments in these field. So it's going to return you a person object in which you can query the name and age, and an OK field, which is a boolean, which is going to give you a true or false. My mutation is basically, you basically say that, hey, I have created a mutation for you. I want to use that. So I defined a my mutation. Query is simple. We have a person class. We can query. And then in the mutation, you have to provide the mutation. So yeah, we explored about mutation. Now, you know, what's the problem with the mutation, you will say. Let me show you a small thing. Maybe that might click your brain. So the problem with the mutation is not, I mean, what I'm saying is if I go here, you see how I have to, if you come here, you have to say name, then age. You say you have like 10 parameters. Are you going to give like 10 parameters like this? No. What you could alternatively do is you could pass an object. So instead of this, you could directly pass an object here. Let me show you. That's called an input field in GraphQL. So let's talk about that. I'm going to read a definition, couple of. Input fields are used in mutation to allow nested input data for mutation. So it allows nested input. To use input field, you define an input object type that specifies the structure of your input data or use context. So if you see here, if I'm going to quickly take my pen here. So if you see, I have a name and age, has a person input field. I defined a class that, and I say it's required. Now, let me make sure I switch my camera here because that would be blocking. So yeah, so I defined that. Now I say simple create user person data. I define an object here, and in the query, if you see, I can directly pass a object here. I don't have to pass like name, colon, blah, 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 blah. Or if you want to use, you can also use what you call this context. Let's see an example of first input field, how you can do that, how you could leverage that in Python. So I'm going to copy the code from my first part, that is a mutation, the exactly same code, and we'll try to mimic this. So we had a person class, we did a create person, we did a mutation and the query, right? So that was that was what we did, right? So now what I'm saying is here, let's modify this into take an object. So all you gotta do is pretty easy. So here you would define one more class, call it class person input. Okay, now this will inherit from, this has to inherit from graphene dot was input object type, right? Now once you do that, now you have to define the arguments that this is going to take. So I'm saying that, hey, okay, no problem. I'm going to say that, hey, it's going to take a string and it's also going to take an age, pretty much this two. So I define that, and what I'm saying is now, hey, this is a required. Hopefully the spelling is correct. So I'm saying that, hey, I'm going to define, this is now going to take, this mutation is going to take an object, and I'm saying that, hey, these are the two fields that I want you to use. Instead of this, what I could do is person underscore data. So I'm gonna define the person underscore data, and I'm gonna now instead I'm just gonna say person input, and now pass in the flag called as required here. Okay, so now what you were saying is that, hey, it's going to take an attribute called as person data. So now instead of all of these, you can replace this with an object, and here instead to use that object, you just say person data dot name to access the attribute, and similarly for age, the age. So that would work pretty much fine, I guess. Just making sure everything is fine. Yeah, rest everything will remain same. Now what happens is, now instead of this, you could easily pass a object here. So hopefully that should make sense now. So it would let's put a string. Okay, so now I'm passing an object. Okay, so with that being said, I try to run my code, should give me the schema. Now let's understand this. Okay, so it's telling me, guys, that first of all, I have a query. Let's go from bottom to top. It has a person. The person class has two things, name and string, right? I have a person input class as well, which takes name and string, and the exclamation mark says that these are required. You have to provide that. The mutation says that it takes an object, person object, and it's a required. The exclamation mark says that it says create person. You can use the word create person in that to create a person object. It takes a person object, which is nothing but this guy right here. So with that being said, if I try to run the query here, which is right here, sure enough, the person is created, Peter. So you see how you can leverage the use of this is called input field. So yeah, as I said, this code is also there. I mean, I'm gonna provide all the codes. Now what's next? Okay, if you don't want to do that, you could also pass this as a variable, I guess. So if you see schema, not sure, let me move my webcam over there now. So if you see here now, let me use a magnify. So yeah, if you see this now, schema.execute name. Yeah, so it's a name and then context. You can say that way if you want to pass attribute using that way. But I wouldn't recommend this. I would say use the object type notation. It's pretty good. So that is that. So that's about input fields and input object types in GraphQL or Graphene. So where are we now? So the next part is basically about variables in GraphQL. So you can pass variables to the query in GraphQL. It's very easy. So what you do is basically, so I wouldn't recommend this. I usually recommend using passing objects for some reason. I don't know why you would do this, but yeah, whatever works for you. We are gonna make a Flask application and all of that. We'll see all of that. So so variables, right? So you can see class query, object type. So we have a field called as user, which has, of course, it takes a user object and an ID, which is required. The user object can be anything, name, age, blah, 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 blah. You're resolving the user and you're saying that it takes an ID because it's a required field. Get u underscore user by ID. Maybe that might be a function. It takes an ID and it's going to return an ID. So now in the query, how everything works is, this is your query, this is the name of the query. Basically get user is nothing but what do you call that? It's you're saying that, hey, you want to grab the users. Now you're passing this as a, so this is just a name. This is just a name you give it on the query. So now this is like a function. It takes the $ID means the value would be substituted and ID. So what it does is basically you can see ID as a $ID. So this value would be substituted here, the $ID. It would go to the ID field and it would go here, ID, first name, last name. So, and then you're passing the variable as well. So what happens is you're saying, hey, GraphQL, give me data where the ID is 12 and give me their last name, first name, and their ID. Hopefully that should make sense. I guess that's pretty much about GraphQL. I guess you have a pretty decent idea with these all example about GraphQL. In the upcoming sessions, in the next session, this was just, as I said, a getting started series. We can do an actual APIs. We can create a Flask REST API, see how we are passing data and everything using GraphQL, how we can have a layer after the what do you call that? So we'll do all of this in Python. Let's in the upcoming future videos we'll do this with the Flask and database and all of that. Hopefully you have enjoyed this small walkthrough about GraphQL, and if you did enjoy, kindly do leave a like. If you have any more questions, leave your question in the comment section. As I said, I'm not an expert in GraphQL. I learned all of these by myself, and I decided to teach you guys. As usual, guys, keep smiling, keep coding, be happy, and would see you guys in the upcoming tutorials where we would be building REST APIs with GraphQL. Stay